There was a rare moment on Parliament Hill today, an announcement no one knew was coming. Liberal leader Justin Trudeau surprised even his own senators when he told them they will no longer be in his caucus. He called the move the most meaningful action possible without changing the Constitution. But many are wondering, how so? Our senior correspondent, Terry Malewski, has the story for us. Terry.
Well, Peter, this unexpected move by Justin Trudeau grabbed everyone's attention, but it also has people scratching their heads about what exactly it means.
There are no more Liberal senators.
Trudeau announced that all 32 Liberal senators have been booted from the Liberal caucus. He wants them to be independents because they are unelected, and he promises an independent body to appoint senators if he becomes Prime Minister.
I will put in place an open, transparent, nonpartisan public process for appointing and confirming senators.
But Trudeau immediately ran into two problems, the other party's and his own. Liberal senators said they do like the move.
We feel liberated by this. We feel positive about it. People are saying, look, we want an independent, unpolitical Senate. They've been asking for this for years.
But Liberal senators also insist they are still Liberals.
I'm not a former Liberal, I'm a Liberal. And I'm a Liberal senator.
That's the Liberal leader in the Senate, and he's not alone.
We're still members of the Liberal Party. And we will be an independent caucus, but we will operate as a caucus within the Senate.
We're proud Liberals fighting for Liberal values. We always have been. That's why we're here.
I always believe in Liberal values, and that's how I've looked at legislation in the Senate, and that will continue.
As for the Tories, they mocked Trudeau when he challenged the Prime Minister to liberate his senators too.
Mr. Speaker, I gather the change announced by the leader today is that unelected Liberal senators will become unelected senators who happen to be Liberal.
The Conservatives also had fun with Trudeau's plan for appointing senators.
To have an unelected committee choose unelected senators is worse than the status quo. Now, I didn't think that was possible.
The NDP, too, dismissed Trudeau's plan as a sham.
I don't think that if you look at the individuals who have always been there shilling and fundraising for the Liberals, all of a sudden they're less partisan. No, the way to deal with the Senate is to eliminate it.
Which, of course, is such a constitutional nightmare that it's practically impossible. Trudeau says he's doing what is possible, but the effect may be imperceptible. After all, if the senators call themselves Liberals, Peter, well, they're still Liberal senators.
The 32 formerly Liberal senators are now independent of the National Liberal Caucus. They are no longer part of our parliamentary team. There are no more Liberal senators.
So just how substantial is what Justin Trudeau announced today? It had good shock value for sure, and it sounds significant to say there will be no more Liberal senators. But those former Liberal senators themselves say they're still Liberals and it won't really affect them at all. So is it really just the smokescreen the Conservatives say it is? I spoke to Justin Trudeau earlier this evening. So the day starts and they're called Liberal senators, the day ends and they're called Senate Liberals. What's really changed here?
Well, I've demonstrated that one can make a big change in the Senate without actually having to open up the Constitution as the others do. My Liberal caucus from now on will only have people who were elected by the people of Canada in it, and senators will be removed from the kind of partisanship and partisan interference that has been all too common from the Prime Minister's office towards them over the past months and years.
So this was really about the caucus. It wasn't about the party. It was all about the caucus, right?
Well, it's very much about Canadians and making sure that we have parliamentary institutions that we believe in and that are focused on serving us. And for over the years, the Senate has become a place that is very much more focused on, in too many cases, on serving partisan interests than serving the people of the region they represent and of their country.
Well, I'm still puzzled as to how that will really change. I mean, you saw what happened today. Many of these former Liberal senators, now calling themselves Senate Liberals, were holding up their Liberal Party membership cards, swearing allegiance to the party, saying they'd still be raising funds, saying they'd still be helping in election campaigns. You're not asking them to stop being Liberals.
Everyone is free to join a political party, so I'm certainly not stopping them from that. But I am removing them from the political operations, the actual functioning of this political party as an entity in Parliament, and that is going to make a very, very large difference, because the senators will become free to evaluate according to what they see as the benefits or negative impacts of any legislation that comes across. This actually is a large change. It's just one that people are just getting used to understanding the implications of.
And I can appreciate that, but one of those implications clearly is that the people who are in there who have been Liberal senators, some of whom going back to being appointed by your father, are dyed-in-the-wool Liberals. It's not like suddenly they're going to say, well, you know, we better start looking at things differently, or look at it from a different light?
The values and the ideals and the perspectives that they have will not change, but the conditions under which they consider a piece of legislation, will this help the political party I'm part of in the House of Commons get elected in the next election, or will it provide enough of a political attack against our opponents, are going to be slightly dampened. But you're right, it is only a first step, and that's why the appointments process that I'm proposing that will appoint people in an open, transparent, non-partisan way will really be the follow-up to this, which is to make sure that we have a Senate that becomes less seized with partisanship and more focused on serving Canadians to the best of its ability.
Who was actually calling for an end to partisanship in the Senate? I mean, there were clearly calls for an elected Senate. There were calls for an abolished Senate. There was calls for the end to, corruption in the Senate. But who was calling for an end to partisanship in the Senate?
I met an awful lot of Canadians across the country who were very, very frustrated to see in the release of documents around the Nigel Wright-Mike Duffy affair, the amount of interference that the Prime Minister's office had in the functioning of what is supposed to be a separate political body in the Senate. The level of interference by the political wing of the Conservative Party over supposedly sober second thought thinking senators was really dismaying to an awful lot of people. And the easy populist answers, disingenuous solutions that both Mr. MULCAIR and Mr. Harper are approving, an elected Senate or an abolished Senate, are just that, disingenuous, because they imply protracted constitutional negotiations that no Canadian wants to get into. Canadians want politicians to be focused on jobs, on their future, on their kids, not on haggling with the provinces over reopening a constitution.
Well, to be fair to Mr. MULCAIR, his motion last fall, which you voted against, did zero in very specifically on the issue of partisanship and wanting to end it. Now, just let me remind you of what you said at the time as to why you voted against. Here's what you told Evan Solomon on CBC Radio.
Because I respect the Constitution of Canada, and regardless of what the NDP might wish to make political hay over, we don't have the capacity in the House of Commons to, on a simple majority vote, eliminate pieces of the Canadian Constitution.
Now, I know that the execution of what he was attempting to do is different than what you did today, but the intent was the same, and you gave no hint as to agreeing with the intent, the idea of ending partisanship in the Senate.
The NDP position has always been abolish the Senate and open up the Constitution to do so. But that motion in the fall actually was about the House of Commons demanding that the Senate engage in particular behaviors or stop engaging in particular behaviors. And our Constitution clearly says that, and the principles stand, that one House cannot command behaviors on the other House. And that's where Mr. MULCAIR demonstrated a lack of understanding in what is in our Constitution.
But the behavior he was talking about was partisanship.
Indeed, but you can't have a House that's demanding it of the Senate.
Then, right? It was the way he was going about trying to end partisanship.
Well, the fact that it's a piece of their abolition proposal, which is irresponsible.
Let me ask you about motivation as to why now, because you've heard a lot of people today on the other side of the House suggesting that the motivation here is the interim report scheduled from the Auditor General soon on the examining expenses of individual senators, and that they seem to think that maybe you've heard in some fashion that the Liberal senators are not going to do very well in that audit. Do you know anything about what's in that audit, or do you know anything about the testimony the Liberal senators have given about their expenses?
No, I know absolutely nothing. The Auditor General nor Liberal senators have not, formerly Liberal senators, have not told me anything about what's going on. This is the Auditor General's inquiry is very much an extension of the demand for transparency that Canadians have had, of accountability around expenses, that was part of what we pushed for as far back as last spring, to start disclosing online the expenses of both senators and MPs. And that's a separate problem, one that definitely needs to be dealt with, but it's a separate problem from the excessive partisanship and patronage in the Senate, which is what I have moved to eliminate today.
But why today? Why not wait for the Supreme Court of Canada and its rulings and its findings on how to change the Senate?
But it's never, you know, the wrong time to do the right thing. I could wait till an election. I could make a promise that if I got elected Prime Minister, then I would make the Senate less partisan. But I chose to act. I chose to say, you know what? We're coming back from a winter break. It's time for the winter sitting of Parliament. Let's try and start this off on a fresh note. Let's make sure that we can demonstrate that you can change the Senate significantly, improve the Senate significantly in a day, which Mr. Harper hasn't been able to do despite all his promises in 8 years. He got elected promising to never appoint a single senator, and he not only appointed 47 of them, he appointed 2 of them twice after they got rejected by voters. No other Prime Minister in Canadian history has ever done that.
Last quick point. Were you surprised in the House of Commons today that you were kind of laughed at by the other parties when you rose this topic?
It's very clear that the other parties don't quite know what to make of this. There is a convention, perhaps, amongst those two parties that one talks a good game, but one doesn't actually get to act. Mr. Harper hasn't acted in 8 years on the Senate since he's been Prime Minister. Mr. MULCAIR talks about needing to open up the Constitution, and that's his solution on what's going to do. I demonstrated that you can actually act and make the Senate significantly better, make it less partisan, make it less patronage-based, and they don't have any other answer than to try and stumble about and poke fun, because they're not serious about serving Canadians the right way.
Mr. Trudeau, we'll leave it at that for now. Thanks very much for your time.
It's always a pleasure.